During the signing at the notary's office, my son snarled, "Sign this, or you'll lose everything, old man." He was smiling, certain he had won, but he had no idea who had come with me that day. 10 minutes later, my son ran out of the room, pale and terrified. He thought the old man was easy prey. Instead, he ran straight into consequences he will never forget. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is in your region right now. My name is Walter Harrison, 67 years old, living in a 2-story house on Oak Ridge Drive in Austin, Texas. 28 years I spent as a district attorney, prosecuting criminals who thought they were smarter than the law. The last 12 years I've been doing commercial property appraisals. People trust my evaluations because I know how to read documents, spot inconsistencies, see what's hidden beneath the surface. That skill served me well in the courtroom. I thought it would serve me well in retirement too. I was wrong about where I'd need it most. My son Brandon is 34. When he was 7, he'd wait by the front window every evening, watching for my car. The moment I pulled into the driveway, he'd sprint out, arms wide, shouting, "Dad!" like I'd been gone for months instead of hours. Those memories feel like they belong to someone else's life now. The man who lives in my house barely looks at me when I walk into a room. He moved in 3 years ago with his wife Ashley. "Just temporarily, Dad," he said, standing in my doorway with suitcases and that smile I'd seen him use on teachers when he forgot his homework. 3 months, maybe 4. Ashley's between jobs, and we're saving for our own place. You know how expensive rent is in Austin? I knew. I also knew that saying no would make me the villain in whatever story they'd tell themselves. So I said yes. 3 months became 6. 6 became 12. Every time I asked about their plans, Brandon had a new reason. Ashley's job didn't pay as much as expected. The housing market was too expensive. They were waiting for the right opportunity. Meanwhile, my utility bills doubled. The water heater I'd replaced 2 years earlier started making concerning noises from the extra showers. The grocery budget I'd carefully maintained for one person stretched thin, feeding 3. Ashley took over the guest room first, then the study, then the garage. My astronomy equipment, my telescope, my star charts, the notebooks where I tracked celestial movements, got pushed into a corner, covered with their storage boxes. "We'll move this stuff soon," she'd say, not looking up from her phone. "We just need the space for now." The shift from gratitude to entitlement was gradual. Like watching a star dim, you don't notice until you realize the light is nearly gone. Brandon stopped saying thank you around month 9. By month 15, he stopped offering to help with groceries. Ashley redecorated the living room without asking, replacing photos of my parents with modern art pieces she found at estate sales. "It needed updating," she explained when I came home to find my mother's portrait in the hallway closet. "This is more contemporary." The final utility bill they paid themselves was 18 months ago. I remember because I had to ask 3 times. Brandon looked annoyed, like I'd requested something unreasonable. "We're contributing in other ways, Dad. Ashley cooks sometimes. She cooked twice a month, usually pasta. I handled everything else." Last month, I came home from an appraisal job to find Ashley measuring the master bedroom, my bedroom, with a tape measure. "What are you doing?" I asked. She smiled that specific smile I'd learned to recognize, the one that preceded something unpleasant disguised as reasonable. "Brandon and I were thinking this room would work better for us. It has the ensuite bathroom, and with your age, you don't really need all this space. The guest room would be perfect for you." "This is my bedroom," I said quietly. "Right, but you're here alone most of the time anyway. We could really use the extra space." She said it like she was doing me a favor, helping me downsize my own life in my own house. I didn't move to the guest room, but that conversation marked something. A line crossed. After that, they stopped pretending. This morning, I made breakfast. Eggs, toast, coffee. I've always liked cooking breakfast, the ritual of it. Brandon came downstairs in his work clothes, checking his phone. Ashley followed, already dressed for her marketing job, her heels clicking on the hardwood floors I'd refinished 5 years ago. They sat down without greeting me, standard procedure lately. I set their plates in front of them. Brandon took a bite, still scrolling through his phone. Ashley sipped her coffee, made a face. "This is weak," she said, pushing the cup away. I said nothing. I've learned that silence sometimes speaks louder than arguments. Brandon set his phone down, looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Dad, we need to talk about something important." The tone was wrong. Too formal, too prepared. I recognized it from my years in the DA's office, the voice people used when they'd rehearsed what they were about to say. "Tomorrow," Brandon continued, "we're going to a notary's office. You, me, and Ashley. There are some documents we need to sign about the house." I set down my fork. "Documents about my house?" "About transferring ownership, yeah." He said it casually, like we were discussing a Netflix subscription. "It just makes sense, Dad. You're getting older. Managing a property this size is a lot of work. We're here anyway. We're taking care of things." "You haven't paid a utility bill in 18 months. Ashley jumped in, her voice sugary and reasonable. "We contribute in other ways. Emotional support, companionship, making sure you're not alone. That has value too, Walter?" She'd started calling me Walter 6 months ago, stopped with Mr. Harrison around the same time she stopped asking permission to rearrange furniture. Brandon leaned forward. "Look, we've set up an appointment for tomorrow at 2 o'clock. This is happening. You can either sign the papers and make this easy, or we can make it complicated. Your choice." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "Is that a threat?" He smiled. The same smile he'd had when he was 7, waiting by the window. But now it carried something else behind it. Something calculating. "Sign it, or you'll lose everything anyway, old man." He laughed like it was a joke between us. "We've already talked to lawyers. They said we have a strong case for adverse possession, for elder abuse claims if you try to kick us out. You need us more than we need you." Ashley reached across the table, patted my hand with false sympathy. "It's just paperwork, Walter. Formality. Nothing really changes." Everything changes, I thought, but I didn't say it. They finished breakfast, left their plates on the table. Brandon grabbed his keys. 2 o'clock tomorrow, 1247 Congress Avenue, 5th floor. Don't be late." He paused at the door, looked back. "And Dad, don't do anything stupid. This is for your own good." The door closed behind them. I sat at the table in my kitchen, in the house I'd bought 32 years ago, and felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Not since my last trial, when a defense attorney thought he could trick me with falsified evidence. That feeling was recognition, the kind that comes when you've spent 28 years learning how criminals think, watching them overplay their hands, seeing the exact moment they believe they've won. Brandon and Ashley thought they were the first people to try playing me. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in my backyard observatory, the small structure I'd built 15 years ago, back when I still believed retirement meant peaceful evenings, studying stars. My telescope pointed at Orion, but I wasn't looking through it. I was thinking. The observatory had been my refuge since the early days of retirement. On difficult nights during my DA years, when a case went wrong or I'd seen something I couldn't unsee, I'd come out here. The stars didn't judge. They didn't lie. They followed predictable patterns, mathematical certainties. Unlike people. Brandon used to join me sometimes, before Ashley. I remembered one night, he must have been 28, maybe 29, when he'd come over after a bad breakup. We'd sat out here for hours, not talking much, just existing in the same space. He'd looked through the telescope, found Jupiter, let out this small sound of wonder that reminded me of the 7-year-old who used to wait by the window. "It's beautiful, Dad," he'd said. "How do you know where to find everything?" "Patience," I told him. "You watch, you learn the patterns, you wait for the right moment." He'd smiled at me then. Really smiled. "You always were patient. Mom used to say it drove her crazy how you could wait out anyone." That memory felt like it belonged to a different timeline, an alternate universe where my son grew into the man I'd hoped he'd become instead of whatever he was now. Ashley changed him, or maybe she just revealed what was already there. I'd seen it happen before, people attracted to others who gave them permission to be their worst selves. During my prosecution days, I'd watched couples reinforce each other's criminal behavior, each one enabling the other to sink deeper. I remembered the first time Brandon brought Ashley home, 2 years before they moved in. She'd been charming, effusive, with compliments about the house, about my career, about what a wonderful father I must have been. The kind of praise that feels slightly off-key, like a song in the wrong key. "This house must be worth quite a bit," she'd said, running her hand along the granite countertop I'd installed. "Property in this neighborhood just keeps appreciating." Red flag. I'd noted it, but dismissed it. Maybe I was being paranoid, reading ulterior motives where none existed, except there had been motives. I just hadn't wanted to see them. 6 months after they moved in, I'd overheard a phone conversation. Ashley talking to someone, probably her mother based on the tone. "Yeah, we're still at Walter's. I know. But Brandon says we just have to be patient. The old man's not getting any younger. Once he's gone, or if we can get him into assisted living, the house is ours. Brandon's the only child. It's basically already ours. We're just waiting." I'd stood in the hallway, frozen, wanting to storm in, confront her, throw them both out. But something stopped me. Maybe it was 28 years of prosecutorial instinct. Maybe it was the knowledge that showing my hand too early meant losing the advantage. I'd said nothing, watched, waited. The pattern became clear. The gradual takeover of rooms. The comments about my age, my capabilities, how I needed help managing things. Ashley had a background in marketing. She knew how to shift perceptions, create narratives. She was building a case, not in court, but in social circles, with neighbors, with Brandon's friends. "Walter's getting forgetful," I'd heard her tell someone at a neighborhood barbecue. "We're worried about him living alone. That's why we're staying, to keep an eye on him." I wasn't forgetful. My property appraisal business relied on precise memory for details, for numbers, for building codes and zoning laws. Banks trusted my evaluations. But Ashley was planting seeds, crafting a story where I was the failing old man who needed their intervention. The breakfast confrontation made sense now. It wasn't impulsive. They'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. The notary appointment, the documents, the casual threat about adverse possession. This was a coordinated play. Brandon might have convinced himself this was justified, that he was owed this, that I should want to give it to him. But Ashley knew exactly what they were doing. Theft, dressed up in legal terminology and false concern. I stood up from the observatory chair, walked back into my house, looked around at the rooms I'd maintained, the floors I'd refinished, the kitchen I'd remodeled. 32 years of my life in these walls. They thought I'd just hand it over. My phone sat on the kitchen counter. I picked it up, scrolled through my contacts, stopped at a name I hadn't called in 2 years. Gerald Martinez, federal prosecutor. We'd worked together on several cases when our jurisdictions overlapped. I'd handled state-level fraud. He'd handled the federal angles when cases got big enough. Smart, ruthless when he needed to be, absolutely intolerant of people who tried to game the legal system. I tapped his name. The phone rang 3 times. "Walter?" His voice carried surprise. "It's been a while. How's retirement treating you?" "Gerald, I need your help with something." "What kind of something?" I looked at the breakfast dishes still on the table, at the photos Ashley had replaced with her estate sale art, at the space where my astronomy books used to be before they'd needed the room. "The kind of something you're going to find interesting," I said. "My son is trying to commit fraud. Against me. Tomorrow afternoon. And I want you there to watch him do it." Silence on the other end. Then Gerald laughed, low and genuinely amused. "You're serious. Completely. Tell me everything." So I did. The 3 years, the gradual escalation, the overheard conversations, the breakfast ultimatum, the appointment tomorrow at the notary's office. Gerald listened without interrupting, a skill good prosecutors develop, the ability to hear a story completely before analyzing it. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "Walter, you spent 28 years catching people who thought they could outsmart the law. Time to show your son you haven't forgotten how. That's why I called you. I'll meet you at that office tomorrow, 1:45. Don't let them know I'm coming. And Walter, don't sign anything no matter what they threaten. Trust me on this." "I do." After we hung up, I made another call. To Roberta Fields, an attorney who specialized in trusts and estate planning. I'd done a property appraisal for one of her clients last year. She'd been impressed with my thoroughness. "Roberta, I need a living trust created. Fast. How quickly can you do it?" "Depends on the complexity. Why the rush? I explained. Not everything, just enough. She was quiet, then spoke with careful precision. I can have basic documents ready by tomorrow morning. It'll cost $3,200 for the expedited service. But Walter, if you're serious about protecting your assets from a potential claim, I'm serious. Then let's do this right. I'll need you in my office first thing tomorrow. Bring your property deed, your financial documents, everything. We'll create a trust that makes your house untouchable through conventional means. The next morning, I was at her office when she unlocked the door. By 11 o'clock, I'd signed documents that transferred my house into a living trust. The property no longer belonged to me personally. It belonged to the trust, governed by terms I'd set, with controls and beneficiaries I'd chosen. Brandon and Ashley's names appeared nowhere in those documents. I paid the $3,200 for my investment account, worth every cent. At 1:30, I stood outside 1247 Congress Avenue, looking up at the 5th floor. Gerald arrived at 1:45, exactly when he'd promised. He wore a dark suit, carried a leather briefcase, looked every inch the federal prosecutor. "You ready for this?" he asked. I thought about 7-year-old Brandon waiting by the window, thought about the man who'd threatened me at breakfast, thought about 3 years of watching my house become someone else's territory while I was treated like an inconvenient tenant in my own life. "I've been ready for 3 years," I said. "I was just waiting for the right moment." Gerald smiled. "Patience. That's what wins cases." That's what I always told Brandon. He should have listened. We rode the elevator up. Brandon and Ashley were already in the lobby, checking their phones. When Brandon saw me, he looked relieved. When he saw Gerald behind me, his expression shifted to confusion. "Dad, who's this?" "My attorney," I said calmly. "Shall we go in?" For the first time since breakfast yesterday, I saw something flicker across Brandon's face that wasn't confidence. It looked like doubt. And I smiled. If they wanted to play games, they'd just learned they were sitting across from someone who wrote the rule book. The morning after Gerald agreed to help, I woke early. Brandon and Ashley were still asleep, or pretending to be. They'd started sleeping later since moving in, emerging from their bedroom around 10 or 11 like teenagers on summer vacation. Meanwhile, I maintained the schedule I'd kept for 40 years. Up at 6, coffee by 6:15, productive before most people checked their first email. I made my coffee in silence, sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, checked my email, 3 new requests for property appraisals, one from a bank evaluating a commercial building downtown, another from a law firm handling an estate settlement, the third from a small business owner looking to refinance. I responded to all 3, scheduled appointments for the following week. My business hadn't slowed down. If anything, it had grown. Banks liked working with me because I was thorough, precise, and my reports held up under scrutiny. The kind of scrutiny that matters when millions of dollars change hands based on your professional opinion. Ashley's narrative about me being too old to manage things would have been laughable if it weren't so calculated. Around 10:30, I heard movement upstairs, the shower running, Ashley's based on the duration. She took 40-minute showers, apparently unbothered by the water bill I paid. Brandon's shower followed, another 20 minutes. Between them, they used more hot water in a morning than I used in a week. I'd stopped mentioning it months ago, started documenting it instead. That was another thing my prosecution days taught me. Documentation defeats denial. People lie easily when confronted verbally, put their behavior in writing with dates and numbers, and suddenly they have nothing to say. I'd been keeping records for 18 months. Every utility bill with their usage patterns highlighted. Every grocery receipt showing what they consumed versus what I bought for myself. Every instance of them using my address for their deliveries, their subscriptions, their credit card bills. They thought I was just being a passive old man, accepting their presence. I was building a case file. Ashley came downstairs first, phone already in hand, scrolling through social media. She poured herself coffee from the pot I'd made, without acknowledgement, sat at the table across from me, still scrolling. I watched her over my laptop screen, really watched her, the way I used to watch defendants in court, looking for tells, for patterns, for the small behaviors that revealed larger truths. She smiled at her phone, not a genuine smile, the performed kind, the one people use for selfies. She angled her coffee cup into frame, snapped a photo, typed something, probably posting about her morning routine or some similar fiction. Her social media presented a carefully curated life: stylish outfits, trendy coffee shops, the successful young professional living her best life, all subsidized by living rent-free in my house. Brandon appeared 10 minutes later, already dressed for work in business casual. He grabbed a protein shake from the refrigerator, one of the expensive organic ones Ashley bought with grocery money I provided, and drank it standing up. "Big meeting today," he announced to no one in particular. "Might be late getting home." I said nothing. Waited. Ashley looked up from her phone. "That's fine, babe. Your dad and I will handle dinner." She glanced at me, that false sweetness back in her voice. "Right, Walter. Maybe you could pick up something from that Thai place you like?" "The one that costs $45 for two people?" I asked mildly. "You can afford it." She said it so casually, like my money was naturally hers to spend, then added with that laugh that was supposed to make everything a joke, "Besides, think of it as an investment in family bonding." Investment. Interesting choice of words from someone who'd invested exactly nothing in 3 years. Brandon checked his phone, frowned. "Dad, did you get a notice from the HOA about the fence?" I did. "Well, are you going to fix it?" The fence had a loose board, one board barely noticeable. I'd planned to repair it over the weekend. "I'll handle it." "You should get someone to do it. At your age, you shouldn't be climbing around with tools." At my age. I was 67, not 90. I'd spent last weekend helping a client move heavy furniture for a staging consultation, but Brandon needed me to be feeble, needed that narrative where I couldn't manage my own property. "I'm capable of repairing a fence," I said. Ashley jumped in, her voice dripping with false concern. "Brandon's just worried about you, Walter. We both are. What if you fell? What if you got hurt and there was no one here to help?" The subtext was clear. "See how much you need us?" I could have pointed out that they were rarely home, that their help consisted of occupying space and consuming resources, that I'd managed this house perfectly well for 29 years before they arrived. Instead, I said, "I'll be careful." They exchanged a look, the kind of look that said, "We'll discuss this later," meaning they'd add inability to accept help to whatever list they were compiling. After they left for work, I sat in the quiet house and felt something crystallize. They were performing. Every concerned comment, every suggestion that I couldn't handle things, every implication that I needed them, it was all performance. Building a narrative, creating evidence for some future claim that they were indispensable, that they deserved what they were trying to take. I opened my laptop, created a new folder, started organizing 3 years of documentation, utility bills in one subfolder, receipts in another, screenshots of Ashley's social media posts that contradicted her claims of taking care of me in a third. My phone rang. Gerald. "Walter, I've been thinking about tomorrow. Your son's meeting with this supposed notary." "And? Do you know who this notary is? Did Brandon give you a name?" "Curtis Dean, that's what he said." I heard keyboard clicking. "There's no Curtis Dean registered as a notary in Travis County. Check the state database, too. Nothing." I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. "So he's using a fake notary." "Looks that way. Which means those documents he wants you to sign aren't just aggressive estate planning. They're likely fraudulent from the start. Can you prove that? Tomorrow, when we walk in there?" "I can prove it in about 60 seconds. But Walter, there's something else you should consider. If they're willing to use a fake notary, they've gone past hoping you'll cooperate. They're actively trying to defraud you." I thought about Brandon at 7 waiting by the window, thought about the man who'd threatened me at breakfast, tried to find where one became the other, and couldn't locate the exact moment. "What do you recommend?" I asked. "We let them try. Let this Curtis Dean person lay out whatever scheme they've planned. Then I shut it down, hard and public, so Brandon understands there are consequences. But that's just stopping the immediate threat. What's your long game?" "My long game. I looked around my kitchen at the house I'd maintained and improved for 3 decades. Thought about 3 years of gradual invasion, of being treated like an inconvenience in my own home. "I want them out," I said, "permanently. And I want them to understand they can't do this to people." "Then you need to protect your assets first. Have you thought about a trust?" I called Roberta Fields this morning, meeting with her this afternoon. Gerald made an approving sound. Good. She's thorough. Get everything into an irrevocable trust if you can, or at least one with solid terms. Make it so even if they tried to claim undue influence or incompetence, the assets are untouchable. After we hung up, I drove to Roberta's office in the business district. She met me in a conference room with a view of downtown Austin, paperwork already prepared. I reviewed what you told me on the phone, she said. This is more common than you'd think. Adult children who feel entitled to their parents' assets before those parents are actually gone. The legal term is elder financial abuse, and Texas takes it seriously. Can they actually succeed if I died tomorrow without a trust? Your son would likely inherit everything as your only child, yes. But you're not dying tomorrow, Walter. And what we're going to do today ensures that even if something unexpected happened, your assets go where you want them to go, not where someone else decides. She walked me through the living trust structure. My house, my investment accounts, my personal property, all would be held by the trust. I'd be the trustee, maintaining complete control during my lifetime. But the terms of distribution after my death would be set in stone, and Brandon's name appeared nowhere in those terms. What about beneficiaries? Roberta asked. Charities? Other family? I thought about it. The Travis County Legal Aid Society, the Austin Public Library, the Texas Astronomy Association. Organizations that had meant something to me. That did actual good. That wouldn't threaten me in my own kitchen. The paperwork took 3 hours. Signatures, notarization, real notarization, with Roberta's licensed notary, who verified my identity and watched me sign every page. The documents were airtight, prepared by someone who specialized in making sure they'd hold up under any challenge. I paid the $3,200 by check, worth every cent. Driving home, I felt something shift. Not quite relief, the confrontation still waited, but certainty. I'd built my defense. Tomorrow, I'd see their attack fail. That evening, Brandon and Ashley were both home for dinner. Ashley had ordered pizza, charged to my credit card naturally. They ate in the living room, watching some reality show, laughing at the drama of other people's manufactured conflicts. I ate in the observatory, looking at Jupiter through my telescope. The planet was clear tonight, its bands of storms visible even through Austin's light pollution. Those storms had been raging for centuries, would continue long after everyone currently on Earth was gone. There was something calming about that perspective. Human drama, human scheming, human greed, all temporary, all ultimately insignificant. But that didn't mean I wouldn't handle what was directly in front of me. My phone buzzed. Text from Gerald. Ready for tomorrow? I looked at Jupiter, at its ancient storms, at its indifference to human concerns. Thought about 28 years prosecuting people who thought they were smarter than consequences. I texted back, I've been ready for 3 years. Tomorrow we just make it official. The day of the meeting arrived with typical Texas summer heat. I dressed carefully, business casual, the same kind of outfit I wore to professional appraisals. Wanted to look competent, capable, exactly what I was. Brandon and Ashley were already up, unusually energetic for 10 in the morning. I could feel their anticipation, their certainty that today they'd finally get what they'd been maneuvering toward for 3 years. Ashley had dressed up too. Professional attire, makeup carefully applied, hair styled. She looked like she was going to a job interview, not a notary appointment. I understood why. She wanted to look like the responsible daughter-in-law, the one taking care of the aging father-in-law who couldn't manage alone. The performance never stopped with her. Ready, Dad? Brandon asked, keys already in hand. He seemed lighter somehow, relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in months. The stress of maintaining the pretense had apparently been wearing on him. Now, thinking it was almost over, he'd let his guard down. Mistake. I'll drive myself, I said. Meet you there. Ashley frowned. That doesn't make sense. We're all going to the same place. I have an appointment afterward. Property appraisal near the Capitol. It's more efficient this way. A small lie, but it served its purpose. I wanted my own vehicle, my own ability to leave when I chose. Didn't want to be trapped in their car, dependent on them for transportation. Brandon shrugged. Fine. Just don't be late. 2 o'clock sharp, 5th floor. Curtis is squeezing us in between other appointments. Curtis. They were on a first-name basis with their fake notary. I wondered how much they'd paid him, how they'd found him, whether Brandon had enough self-awareness to realize he was committing fraud, or if he'd convinced himself this was somehow justified. I arrived at 1247 Congress Avenue at 1:45, parked in the garage, took the elevator to the ground floor, waited in the lobby. The building was typical Austin professional space, modern, glass-heavy, the kind of place that housed law firms and consultancy agencies and startup tech companies. Gerald arrived at 1:47 exactly on time. He wore a dark suit, carried a leather briefcase, looked every inch the federal prosecutor he was. When he walked, people moved aside, not consciously, just that unconscious recognition of someone who held authority. "You good?" he asked quietly. "Better than good. Remember, let them lay it all out. Don't sign anything, but don't refuse too quickly either. I want to see exactly what they're trying to pull before I shut it down." We rode the elevator up together. The 5th floor was quieter than the lobby. Just a hallway with numbered offices, generic corporate carpet, fluorescent lighting. Office 512 had a temporary-looking placard. Dean Notary Services. Brandon and Ashley were already in the small waiting area, sitting on cheap chairs that looked rented. They stood when they saw me. Then Brandon noticed Gerald, and his expression flickered. Confusion, then forced pleasantness. "Dad, who's this?" "Gerald Martinez, federal prosecutor, my attorney." I said it matter-of-factly, like this was completely normal. Ashley's smile froze. "Attorney? Why do you need an attorney for a simple notarization?" "Anytime I'm signing important documents, I bring legal counsel. Standard practice." It wasn't standard practice for most people, but it was standard practice for someone who'd spent 28 years watching people get trapped by documents they didn't fully understand. A door opened. Man in his early 40s, professional but not quite polished. Cheap suit, nervous energy. "Mr. Harrison, come on in. I'm Curtis Dean." We filed into his office. It was sparse. Desk, chairs, filing cabinet, single motivational poster on the wall. The kind of space someone rented short-term, not a permanent practice. I cataloged details automatically. No state licensing certificates on the wall. No professional association memberships displayed. No photos or personal items that suggested longevity. Curtis seemed thrown by Gerald's presence. He glanced at Brandon, who gave a tight shrug. We all sat. Curtis pulled out a folder, extracted documents. I recognized the forms, a quitclaim deed and a power of attorney. Legal forms, but only valid if properly notarized by someone actually licensed. "So," Curtis began, his voice slightly uncertain, "Mr. Harrison, your son explained the situation. You're transferring ownership of your property to ensure it stays in the family, and granting power of attorney for healthcare and financial decisions. Very common estate planning for someone your age." Someone my age. There it was again, that assumption of incapacity, based solely on having lived 67 years. I picked up the quitclaim deed, read it slowly. It transferred my house, described by exact legal coordinates and deed reference, from me to Brandon Harrison for $1 and other valuable consideration. The valuable consideration wasn't specified. "What exactly is the other valuable consideration?" I asked. Brandon jumped in. "Our care for you, Dad. 3 years of living with you, helping you, making sure you're not alone. Care that cost me approximately $47,000 in unpaid rent, utilities, and expenses," I said quietly. Silence. Curtis looked uncomfortable. Ashley's jaw tightened. "That's not how family works," Ashley said, her voice sharp now, the sweetness gone. "You don't charge family for helping?" "No," I agreed. "You don't charge family. But taking without asking, that's not helping. That's something else." Brandon's face reddened. "Are you seriously going to nickel and dime us? After everything?" "After everything what?" I kept my voice level, curious. "After you moved in temporarily and stayed 3 years? After you stopped contributing financially? After you tried to take over my bedroom? Please, finish that sentence. After everything what?" Curtis cleared his throat. "Maybe we should focus on the documents. Mr. Harrison, if you have concerns, we can address them in the terms." I turned to him. "What's your notary license number?" He blinked. "I'm sorry?" Your license number for the Texas Notary Registry. I'd like to verify it before I sign anything requiring notarization. Curtis's face went pale. It's in my files. I can get it. Gerald stood up smoothly, pulled out his federal credentials, set them on the desk where everyone could see. Gerald Martinez, federal prosecutor, Western District of Texas. Mr. Dean, I checked the Texas Secretary of State's database this morning. There is no Curtis Dean registered as a notary in any Texas county. Would you like to explain that? The room went very still. Curtis's hand moved toward the documents. Gerald's hand moved faster, covering them. I'll be taking these as evidence. Attempting to notarize documents without a license is a state crime. Using false notarization to obtain property is fraud. That becomes federal when it involves interstate commerce, which this does since property records are digitally transmitted across state lines. Curtis stood abruptly. I don't know what you're talking about. There's been some mistake. The mistake was thinking you could do this without consequences. Gerald picked up the documents, slid them into his briefcase. You have 3 options. 1, you leave now and hope I'm too busy to prosecute. 2, you stay and try to explain this to the Texas Rangers Fraud Division. 3, you tell me who approached you and what they offered. Curtis grabbed his jacket. I don't have to answer that. No, you don't. But Texas Penal Code 32.21 carries up to 10 years for forging government documents. Worth thinking about. Curtis practically ran from his own office. We heard his footsteps rapid in the hallway, then gone. The silence that followed was profound. Brandon stared at the empty doorway. Ashley stared at Gerald. I sat quietly, watching their faces process what had just happened. You set us up, Brandon said finally, his voice hollow. No, I corrected. You set yourselves up. I just declined to be the victim you needed. Ashley found her voice, and it came out sharp and angry. You brought a federal prosecutor to ambush your own son? What kind of father? The kind who recognizes fraud when he sees it. I stood, buttoned my jacket. The kind who spent 28 years prosecuting exactly this type of scheme. Did you really think I wouldn't notice you were using a fake notary? We were trying to help you. Brandon's voice rose. You're alone. You're aging. You need someone to manage things before you lose everything. I've lost nothing. My property appraisal business is thriving. My investments are solid. My health is excellent. The only thing I was losing was my house, my peace, and my dignity. You weren't helping me. You were robbing me in slow motion. Gerald closed his briefcase. Gentlemen, I'm going to step outside and give you privacy for family discussion. But, Mr. Harrison, I advise you not to sign anything today, or any day, without independent legal review. He left. The door closed. Brandon and Ashley stood on one side of the empty office. I stood on the other. The distance felt wider than the few feet of cheap carpet between us. Dad, Brandon started. I put the house in a living trust yesterday, I said. It's no longer mine personally. It's held in trust, with terms I established, and neither of your names appear in those terms. Even if I died tomorrow, you wouldn't inherit it automatically. That ship has sailed. Ashley's face went white. You can't do that. We have rights. You have the rights I choose to give you, which at this moment are none. I walked toward the door, stopped. You have 60 days to find other living arrangements. If you're not out voluntarily, I'll file for eviction. Your choice. I left them standing there and walked out to where Gerald waited. In the elevator down, neither of us spoke. When we reached the parking garage, Gerald turned to me. They'll fight this. You know that. I'm counting on it. He raised an eyebrow. Most people would hope for cooperation. I thought about Curtis Dean's panicked flight, about Brandon's shock when his plan collapsed, about 3 years of careful documentation sitting in folders on my computer. Gerald, I spent nearly 3 decades in courtrooms. I know how people fight when they're desperate. I know what evidence survives challenges. I know how to win. So what's next? I looked up at the Austin sky, bright and hot and indifferent. Next, I teach my son the most expensive lesson he'll ever learn, the one about consequences. Gerald smiled, the expression of someone who recognized a worthy opponent. You're not the person they thought you were. No, I agreed. I never was. They just needed me to be. I drove home alone, windows down, letting the hot wind clear my head. The house would be a battlefield now. Brandon and Ashley wouldn't accept this quietly. They'd regroup, find another angle, try another strategy, but I'd been waiting 3 years for them to overplay their hand. And now, finally, they had. The game had truly begun. I sat in Gerald's office the morning after the failed notary meeting, drinking coffee from a paper cup that tasted like it had been sitting on the burner too long. Gerald was on the phone with someone from the Texas Secretary of State's office, following up on Curtis Dean. When he hung up, he looked satisfied. Curtis Dean is in the wind. No record of him anywhere, not as a notary, not as a registered business entity. Either a complete fake identity or someone who thought a temporary office rental and a cheap suit would be enough to pull this off. Brandon paid him, I said. Probably not much. 5,000, maybe less. How do you know? Because Brandon's always been cheap when it comes to other people's services. Generous with my money, frugal with his own. Gerald made a note on his legal pad. Your son is going to come at you again. People don't just accept a loss like this. They get angry, they get creative, they get desperate. I know. I'd seen it in court 100 times. Defendants who thought they had the perfect crime, only to watch it fall apart. The smart ones accepted defeat. The desperate ones doubled down. Brandon would double down. Ashley would make sure of it. What's your next move? Gerald asked. I pulled out a folder from my briefcase. 3 years of documentation printed and organized. Utility bills with payment records. Credit card statements showing charges to my accounts for things I never bought. Photos of the rooms they'd taken over. Of my astronomy equipment pushed into corners. Of Ashley's redecorating that I never authorized. I'm going to make sure they understand the position they're actually in, I said, not the position they think they're in. Gerald flipped through the folder, his prosecutor's eye cataloging evidence. This is thorough. You've been tracking everything. Since month 6, when I started noticing the pattern. Most people wouldn't have the discipline. Most people weren't district attorneys. I took another sip of the terrible coffee. When do you think they'll make their next move? Soon. Probably today. They need to regain control of the narrative, make themselves the victims somehow. He closed the folder, slid it back across the desk. You ready for that? I thought about the living trust documents sitting in my safe at home, legally filed and notarized. Thought about the 3 years of careful record keeping. Thought about 28 years of watching people try to manipulate systems they didn't fully understand. I've been ready for 3 years, I said. I was just waiting for them to give me a reason. I got home around noon. Brandon's car was in the driveway. He'd clearly called in sick to work, or maybe just decided not to go. Ashley's car sat next to his. They were both home, both waiting. The ambush was obvious. I'd expected it. I walked in through the front door, set my keys in the bowl on the entry table like I always did. The house felt different, charged with the kind of tension that precedes confrontation. They were in the living room, waiting. Brandon stood by the fireplace, arms crossed. His face was red, that particular shade of anger mixed with humiliation. Ashley sat on the couch, but her posture was rigid, ready to spring. We need to talk, Brandon said. His voice came out harder than usual, trying for authority. About? I kept my tone neutral, curious. About what you did yesterday. Bringing a federal prosecutor to intimidate us. Sabotaging our attempt to help you. Help me. I let the words sit there, examined them like a specimen under glass. Is that what you're calling fraud now? Help? Ashley jumped in, her voice sharp. You betrayed your family, Walter. You brought a stranger to humiliate your own son in front of... Gerald isn't a stranger. He's a colleague. And I didn't humiliate Brandon. Brandon humiliated himself by trying to use a fake notary to steal my property. Steal? Brandon's voice went up an octave. It's estate planning. It's making sure the family home stays in the family. The family home is staying exactly where it is. In my control. Under my terms. You put it in a trust. Ashley stood now, her carefully maintained composure cracking. You cut us out completely. After 3 years of taking care of you, of making sure you weren't alone. I laughed. Couldn't help it. The sound came out dry, humorless. Taking care of me? Ashley, you haven't paid a utility bill in 18 months. You've redecorated my house without permission. You tried to take over my bedroom. You've spent approximately $47,000 of my money over 3 years while contributing nothing. That's not taking care of someone. That's parasitism. Brandon's face went from red to something closer to purple. How dare you? I have spreadsheets, I said calmly. Every bill, every expense, every charge to my credit card that wasn't mine. 3 years of documentation. Would you like to see it? Silence. The kind that follows when someone realizes their opponent has been 10 steps ahead the entire time. Ashley recovered first, switching tactics with the fluidity of someone who'd done this before. Her voice went soft, wounded. Walter, we're family. How can you put numbers on family? How can you reduce 3 years of companionship, of emotional support, to spreadsheets and bills? Easily, because you reduced me to an asset to be harvested. You never wanted to take care of me. You wanted to take from me. There's a difference. Brandon tried another angle. Dad, I'm your only son. I'm your only child. Everything you have should come to me eventually. We're just trying to make that transition easier for everyone. By forging documents, by using a fake notary, by threatening me in my own kitchen. I walked to the window, looked out at my backyard, at the observatory I'd built 15 years ago. Brandon, if you'd asked me 5 years ago to help you buy a house, I probably would have. If you'd approached this honestly, we could have worked something out. But you didn't want to ask. You wanted to take. And you wanted me to be too old, too weak, too confused to stop you. You are old, Ashley said, venom creeping into her voice now that sympathy hadn't worked. You're 67. You can't keep up this house forever. You can't keep working forever. Eventually, you're going to need help, and when I do, I'll hire professionals, people who don't have a financial incentive to see me fail. I turned back to face them. You have 60 days to find another place to live. Brandon's mouth opened, closed, opened again. You can't be serious. Completely serious. 60 days. After that, I file for eviction. You'd evict your own son? Brandon's voice cracked, genuine disbelief breaking through the anger. You tried to steal my house. What did you think would happen? Ashley's hands were shaking now, her carefully painted nails digging into her palms. We'll fight this. We'll get lawyers. We'll prove you're not competent to make these decisions, that someone influenced you, that you're not thinking clearly. Please do. I smiled then, couldn't help it. Please hire lawyers. Please file motions. Please try to prove I'm incompetent. I'd enjoy that very much. Something in my tone must have penetrated, because they both went still. You want us to fight this, Brandon said slowly, realization dawning. Why? Because I spent 28 years in courtrooms. I know what evidence looks like. I know what competency evaluations involve. I know exactly how a judge will view a 67-year-old man who's still successfully running a property appraisal business, managing his own investments, maintaining his property, and living independently. I paused, and I know how that same judge will view a son who tried to commit fraud against his own father. The color drained from Ashley's face, actually drained, like someone had opened a tap. She'd understood. Brandon was slower. You're bluffing. Am I? Gerald has the documents Curtis tried to use. They're evidence of attempted fraud. He's already filed a report with the Texas Attorney General's office. If you push this, if you try to claim I'm incompetent or influenced, I'll make sure every piece of evidence about your attempted theft becomes part of the public record, and then we'll see who the judge believes. The silence that followed was profound. I walked to the kitchen, poured myself water from the filter pitcher I'd installed, drank it slowly while they stood in the living room, processing. When I came back, Brandon had sat down, his face in his hands. Ashley stood behind him, one hand on his shoulder, her expression calculating, already thinking of the next move. The trust is done, I said. It's filed, it's legal, and it's irrevocable. Even if I wanted to change it now, I couldn't. Your names aren't in it. Your children's names aren't in it, if you ever have children. When I die, everything goes to charity. You get nothing. I'm your son, Brandon said, his voice muffled by his hands. Yes, and I'm teaching you the most important lesson I ever learned in my career. Actions have consequences. You tried to steal from me. Now you lose everything you thought you'd inherit. Seems fair. I left them there and went to my observatory. Sat in the chair where I'd sat 1,000 nights before, looking at stars that had died millions of years ago, their light just now reaching Earth. Everything ends. Everything changes. Nothing is permanent, except the choice between right and wrong. That stays constant. They didn't speak to me for 2 days. Brandon left for work early, came home late. Ashley spent her time on her phone, typing furiously, making calls in hushed tones from their bedroom. I could hear the murmur of her voice through the walls, that particular cadence that meant she was working on something, manipulating some new angle. I went about my business, had a property appraisal scheduled for a small office building on the east side, spent 3 hours measuring, photographing, noting foundation issues, and roof condition. The client was pleased. My reports were always thorough, always held up under bank scrutiny. Driving home, my phone rang. Gerald. Walter, heads up. Your son's wife just hired Scott Elliott. Should I know who that is? Family law attorney. Specializes in what he calls complex domestic situations. Usually means adult children trying to get control of their parents' assets. He's good at painting elderly people as incompetent, convincing judges they need guardians. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Guardianship? They're going for guardianship? Looks like it. Elliot filed preliminary paperwork this morning, claiming you might be suffering from diminished capacity, that you made the trust under undue influence, that you're exhibiting concerning behavior, the usual playbook. What kind of concerning behavior? Let's see. I heard papers rustling. Quote, subject spends excessive time alone in backyard structure, exhibits antisocial tendencies, makes decisions that harm family relationships, shows signs of paranoia by hiring attorneys for simple family matters. Unquote. I almost laughed. My observatory was concerning behavior. My reasonable self-protection was paranoia. The fact that I didn't want to be robbed meant I had diminished capacity. What's the timeline? I asked. Hearing in 2 weeks. Judge will hear Elliot's petition, decide if there's enough evidence to order a psychological evaluation. If the judge orders an eval and the psychologist finds issues, they could appoint a temporary guardian while the case proceeds. And if they get temporary guardianship, then that person controls your finances, your medical decisions, your living situation, everything, until the court decides otherwise. 2 weeks. They'd given me 60 days to make them leave, so they were trying to take control before that deadline hit. Smart, in a ruthless kind of way. Gerald, I need you to prepare a defense. Already on it. But Walter, I need you to do something too. What? Get a complete medical evaluation, cognitive testing, the works. 3 independent doctors if you can. We need documentation that you're sharp as ever, that there's no diminished capacity, no signs of dementia or impairment. When? Tomorrow. I'll set up the appointments. That evening, Brandon and Ashley came home together. I was in the kitchen making dinner, just for myself, since they'd made it clear we weren't a family that ate together anymore. Ashley walked in, her expression carefully neutral, professional. She'd prepared for this conversation. Walter, we've been thinking. I didn't respond, just kept chopping vegetables for the stir-fry I was making. We were hasty, emotional. The notary thing was a mistake. Brandon's friend offered to help, and we didn't check credentials properly. That's on us. We apologize. The apology was smooth, practiced, meaningless. But we're still concerned about you, she continued. The trust? Bringing in prosecutors? These aggressive actions toward family? They're not like you. We think maybe you should talk to someone, a professional, just to make sure you're okay. There it was, the setup. Get me to agree to a psychological evaluation, then use whatever the psychologist said to support their guardianship claim. I'm fine, I said, not looking up from my cutting board. Are you, though? Brandon appeared in the doorway, playing his assigned role in their script. Dad, you've changed. You've become paranoid, suspicious. You think everyone's out to get you. Not everyone, just the 2 people who tried to forge documents to steal my house. Ashley's professional mask slipped for a second, showing the anger underneath. We're trying to help you, and you're being hostile. That's concerning, Walter. That's the kind of behavior that worries us. I set down my knife, turned to face them fully. You've filed for guardianship. The way they both went still told me everything. How did you... Brandon started, then stopped. I have friends too. Better friends than Curtis Dean. I picked up my knife again, resumed chopping. You're trying to have me declared incompetent so you can control my assets. It's clever, in a sociopathic kind of way. Can't steal the house through fraud, so steal it through legal manipulation instead. We're protecting you from yourself. Ashley's voice rose, the calm facade cracking. You're making terrible decisions, cutting off your only family, trusting strangers over your own son, acting like we're enemies when we've done nothing but try to help. You tried to steal my house. Because you're too old to manage it, she was shouting now, 3 years of fake sweetness burning away in sudden rage. You're 67. You should be in assisted living, not pretending you can still handle a property this size, still working like you're 40. We're trying to save you from yourself before you lose everything. The only thing I was losing was my property to you. I kept my voice level, calm. Let her rage make the contrast more obvious. But that's done now. You can't have it through fraud, and you can't have it through guardianship. You don't know that, Brandon said, trying to regain control. The court will see medical evaluations from 3 independent doctors, confirming I'm fully competent. They'll see evidence that I'm still successfully working in a field that requires precision and mental acuity. They'll see bank records proving I managed $340,000 in investments without assistance. They'll see that I maintain this property, pay my bills on time, and live independently. I watched Brandon's face as he processed this, watched the realization hit that I'd anticipated their move, that I was already 10 steps ahead. And they'll see documentation of your attempted fraud, I continued. They'll see 3 years of you living here rent-free while I paid every bill. They'll see your fake notary scheme, and they'll wonder why, if I'm so incompetent, you needed to commit crimes to get my property. Ashley's hands started shaking, actually shaking, her fingers trembling, as the implications sank in. You can't, she whispered. If you tell them about Curtis, Brandon could be charged with fraud? Yes. Conspiracy to commit fraud? Also, yes. Texas Penal Code 32.21, like Gerald explained, up to 10 years. Brandon stood frozen, his face gone pale. Not the healthy pale of surprise, but the gray-white pale of someone whose blood pressure has just dropped, whose body has just realized it's in serious trouble. You'd send me to prison? His voice came out barely above a whisper. Your own son? You tried to steal my house. Did you think there wouldn't be consequences? I'm your family. His voice cracked, genuine panic finally breaking through. I'm your son. How can you even threaten? The same way you threatened me at breakfast. Sign it, or you'll lose everything, old man. Remember, when you thought you held all the cards? I turned back to my stir-fry, added the vegetables to the hot pan. You made a choice. Now you live with it. Dad, please. Brandon's voice changed, became younger, vulnerable. For a moment he sounded like the 7-year-old who used to wait by the window. Please don't do this. We'll leave. We'll move out. Just don't press charges. I'm not pressing charges. Gerald filed a report with the Attorney General's office. It's their decision now, not mine. Ashley grabbed Brandon's arm. We need to go. We need to call Scott. You need to drop the guardianship petition, I said without turning around. Today. Call Scott Elliott. Tell him you made a mistake. Withdraw the filing. Because if you don't, I will tell the judge exactly why you're really doing this, and I'll provide evidence. And if we drop it? Ashley asked, her voice tight. Then you have 58 days to find somewhere else to live. If you're gone before then, if you don't cause any more problems, I won't actively encourage the Attorney General's office to prosecute. I won't promise they'll drop it. That's their decision. But I won't help them build a case. That's blackmail, Ashley said. No, that's consequences. You're learning the difference. They stood in my kitchen, in the house they'd tried to steal, and for the first time in 3 years, they had no move to make, no manipulation to deploy, no angle to work. They were trapped, and they knew it. 58 days, I repeated, starting tomorrow. Be gone, or I file eviction proceedings and provide the court with every piece of documentation I have. All of it. I heard Ashley's breathing, quick and shallow, heard Brandon's silence, The kind that comes when someone's world is collapsing and they don't know how to stop it. They left the kitchen without another word. I heard them go upstairs, heard their bedroom door close, heard the muffled sound of urgent, angry conversation. I finished making my dinner, ate it in the observatory under the stars. Jupiter was particularly bright tonight, its 4 largest moons visible even through the light pollution. Galileo had discovered those moons over 400 years ago, one man with a primitive telescope, seeing what no one had seen before. Sometimes you just needed to know where to look, and how long to wait for the perfect moment to strike. They didn't drop the guardianship petition. I knew they wouldn't. Despite my offer, despite the threat of exposure, Ashley was too invested in the narrative she'd built. She'd spent 3 years convincing herself, and trying to convince everyone else, that I was a failing old man who needed their intervention. Walking away now would mean admitting it was all manipulation. Pride is expensive. They were about to learn exactly how much. 3 days after our kitchen confrontation, I received formal notice. The petition had been amended, not withdrawn. Scott Elliott, their attorney, had added new claims. Undue influence by Gerald Martinez, possible coercion in creating the trust, concerns about my judgment and decision-making capacity. Gerald called me after he received his copy. They're going all in. Elliott's claiming I manipulated you into the trust, that I took advantage of our professional relationship to isolate you from family. Can he prove that? No, because it didn't happen. But he doesn't need to prove it to create doubt. He just needs to make the judge wonder if maybe there's something there worth investigating. I sat at my kitchen table, reading through Elliott's petition. It was professionally written, carefully worded, made me sound like a lonely, vulnerable man who'd fallen under the influence of a persuasive attorney, made Brandon and Ashley sound like concerned children trying to protect their father from predators. It was fiction, but it was well-crafted fiction. What do we need for the hearing? I asked. Everything we discussed. Medical evaluations, financial records, professional references. But Walter, there's something else. What? Elliott's going to call witnesses. People who'll testify about your behavior, your social isolation, your cognitive state. He's been preparing this for days. Who? Your neighbors, probably. Maybe people from Brandon's social circle. Anyone who's interacted with you and might be convinced you're showing signs of decline. I thought about my neighbors, the Johnsons 2 houses down, who I helped with their property tax appeal last year. The Parkers across the street, whose son I wrote a college recommendation letter for. The Martinez family, no relation to Gerald, who borrowed my telescope for their daughter's science project. Would they testify against me? Would they be convinced I was incompetent? Let him call witnesses, I said. I'll call my own. Over the next week I prepared. Underwent comprehensive medical evaluations with 3 different doctors, a general practitioner, a neurologist, and a geriatric psychiatrist. Took cognitive tests, memory assessments, executive function evaluations. The results came back exactly as I expected. Cognitive function normal for age, no signs of dementia or impairment, fully capable of independent living and financial management. I gathered letters from clients I'd worked with in the past 6 months. Bank executives who'd relied on my property appraisals for commercial loans, real estate developers who'd hired me for due diligence on major purchases. Each letter confirmed the same thing. My work was thorough, professional, and demonstrated sharp analytical thinking. Meanwhile, Brandon and Ashley were building their own case. I watched them, not obviously, but with the same attention I'd given to defendants during trials. They were gathering evidence, creating a narrative, preparing their performance. Ashley started inviting neighbors over for coffee, casual conversations that I'm sure touched on concerns about Walter's recent changes. I heard her on the phone with Brandon's friends, her voice carefully modulated between worry and discretion. We're just concerned. Yes, exactly. No, we don't want to betray his privacy, but if the court asks... She was good. If I didn't know better, I'd almost believe she cared. Brandon took a different approach, started making a show of helping around the house, fixing the fence I'd planned to repair myself, mowing the lawn, doing visible yard work, creating the image of the devoted son taking care of his aging father's property. Too little, too late, and transparent as glass once you knew what to look for. The hearing was set for a Tuesday morning at the Travis County Courthouse. I dressed carefully, professional but not ostentatious, navy suit, white shirt, conservative tie, the same outfit I'd worn to court hundreds of times as a prosecutor. Gerald met me on the courthouse steps. Ready? I've been ready for 3 years. This is just the closing argument. The courtroom was smaller than the ones I'd worked in during my career. Family court, not criminal. Different stakes, different procedures, but the fundamental dynamic was the same. Two sides presenting competing narratives, a judge deciding which version of reality to accept. Brandon and Ashley sat with Scott Elliott at the petitioner's table. Ashley had dressed conservatively, projecting concerned daughter-in-law. Brandon wore a suit I recognized. I'd bought it for him 3 years ago for a job interview. The irony wasn't lost on me. Judge Constance Reynolds entered, and we all stood. She was in her mid-50s, with the particular expression of someone who'd heard every possible variation of family conflict and wasn't easily impressed. Elliot went first. His opening was smooth, sympathetic, painted a picture of a successful professional, me, who'd started showing concerning changes after retirement. Social isolation, unusual behavior, sudden distrust of family, making important legal decisions without consulting loved ones. Your Honor, we're not saying Mr. Harrison is incapable. We're saying he may be vulnerable to influence, and that warrants investigation. His sudden creation of an irrevocable trust, cutting out his only child, refusing reasonable attempts at family communication, these aren't the actions of the Walter Harrison his family knows. He called his first witness. Mrs. Johnson, my neighbor. She testified that I'd become quieter in recent months, that I spent more time alone, that she'd seen me in my backyard observatory at odd hours. On cross-examination, Gerald asked one question. Mrs. Johnson, has Mr. Harrison ever appeared confused when you've spoken with him? No. Has he ever forgotten your name, your address, basic facts about your property? No, but thank you. No further questions. Elliot called 2 more neighbors, both with similar testimony. Walter seemed withdrawn. Walter spent time alone. Walter seemed different. None of them could identify actual cognitive impairment, just behavior that seemed unusual to them. Then Elliot called his surprise witness. Brandon. My son took the stand, looking appropriately concerned. Elliot led him through a careful narrative. The loving son worried about his father, the gradual changes he'd noticed, the attempts to help that were rebuffed. Mr. Harrison, can you describe your father's behavior over the past few months? Brandon took a breath, like the question pained him. He's changed. He used to be warm, trusting. Now he's suspicious of everything. He brought a federal prosecutor to a simple notary appointment. He accused Ashley and me of trying to steal from him when we were just trying to help. He talks about us like we're criminals instead of his family. Do you believe your father is making these decisions freely? I think someone convinced him we're his enemies. Gerald Martinez has been influencing him, turning him against us. Dad would never cut me out of his inheritance on his own. Someone pushed him to do that. It was a good performance. Brandon looked genuinely hurt, genuinely confused. If I didn't know the truth, if I hadn't heard him threaten me in my own kitchen, hadn't watched him try to use a fake notary to steal my property, I might have believed him. Elliot finished, looked satisfied. Gerald stood. Didn't move from our table, just looked at Brandon with the expression I'd seen him use on hostile witnesses in federal court. Mr. Harrison, did you arrange a meeting with a man named Curtis Dean? Brandon hesitated. We wanted to help Dad with estate planning. Yes or no? Did you arrange that meeting? Yes. Did you know Curtis Dean was not a licensed notary? Longer hesitation. He was recommended by a friend. Did you verify his credentials before taking your father to sign legal documents? No. Did you tell your father the documents would transfer ownership of his house to you? We were trying to help. Yes or no? Yes. For $1. You were trying to transfer a house worth over $500,000 from your father to yourself for $1. Is that help? Brandon's face had gone red. It was estate planning. Estate planning typically happens after someone dies, Mr. Harrison. Your father is very much alive. What you attempted was transferring ownership while he's alive, without his full understanding, using an unlicensed notary. Does that sound like estate planning or fraud? Objection. Elliot was on his feet. Argumentative, Your Honor. Sustained. Mr. Martinez, questions only. Gerald nodded, unbothered. Mr. Harrison, have you and your wife paid rent while living in your father's house for 3 years? It's family. Yes or no? No. Have you paid utilities? Not recently, but property taxes? No. Insurance? No. So for 3 years, you and your wife have lived rent-free, contributed nothing to household expenses, and when your father created a legal trust to protect his property, you filed a petition claiming he's mentally incompetent. Is that accurate? Brandon opened his mouth, closed it. You're twisting things. I'm stating facts. Thank you. No further questions. Brandon left the stand, looking shaken. Ashley's hand found his under the table, gripping tight. Elliot called one more witness, a psychologist who'd reviewed the petition and offered an opinion that the behaviors described could indicate early cognitive decline. Gerald got him to admit he'd never actually met me, never evaluated me, was offering an opinion based solely on second-hand descriptions from family members with a financial interest in the outcome. Then it was our turn. Gerald presented the medical evaluations. 3 independent doctors, all board-certified, all stating clearly that my cognitive function was normal, that I showed no signs of impairment, that I was fully capable of making my own decisions. He presented financial records showing I independently managed a substantial investment portfolio, that I'd made consistently sound financial decisions, that my retirement accounts were well maintained and growing. Then he called his witness. Robert Shaw entered the courtroom in an expensive suit, the kind CEOs wear to board meetings. He was sworn in, stated his name and position, Chief Executive Officer of TechStream Solutions, a mid-sized IT company with 400 employees. Gerald walked him through his testimony. Mr. Shaw, have you met Walter Harrison? Yes, several times over the past year. In what context? I hired him to do property appraisals for our company. We were considering purchasing a building downtown for expansion. Mr. Harrison evaluated the property, provided detailed analysis of structural integrity, market value, potential issues. His report was crucial in our decision-making. When was your most recent interaction with him? 2 weeks ago, we had a meeting to discuss another property we're considering. How did Mr. Harrison seem to you during that meeting? Robert looked directly at me, then at the judge. Sharp, professional. He caught issues with the property that our own real estate team had missed. Zoning complications, foundation concerns. His analysis was detailed, thorough, and honestly more comprehensive than we expected. Mr. Harrison demonstrated exceptional clarity and professional judgment. Did he seem confused, impaired, or influenced by anyone? Not at all. He seemed like exactly what he is, an experienced professional who knows his field inside and out. Gerald paused. Mr. Shaw, one more question. Does Brandon Harrison work for your company? He did, until last week. Why did his employment end? Robert's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his tone. I became aware of legal issues involving attempts to defraud his father. My company handles sensitive financial data. We can't employ someone who's demonstrated willingness to commit fraud, even against family, especially against family. The courtroom went very still. Thank you, Gerald said. No further questions. Elliot tried to recover on cross-examination, but there was nothing to work with. Robert Shaw had no connection to me beyond professional services, no reason to lie, no motive except telling the truth. Judge Reynolds called a brief recess. When she returned, she didn't waste time. I've reviewed the evidence and heard testimony. The petition for guardianship is denied. Mr. Harrison has demonstrated clear mental capacity. The medical evidence is overwhelming. His professional work continues at a high level. This petition appears to be motivated not by genuine concern for Mr. Harrison's welfare, but by disappointment over estate planning decisions that are entirely his right to make. She looked at Brandon and Ashley. Mr. and Mrs. Harrison, your father-in-law, is a competent adult. His decision to place his assets in a trust is legal and valid. This court will not be used to overturn legitimate estate planning, because family members disagree with those plans. She closed the file. Petition denied. Case dismissed. The gavel came down. Ashley's reaction was immediate. She grabbed Brandon's arm, pulled him toward the door before the judge had even left the bench. I watched them go. Ashley's face twisted with rage. Brandon's blank with shock. Gerald gathered his files. That went well. Did you expect otherwise? No. But they'll try something else. I know. We walked out into Austin's sunshine. Gerald's phone buzzed. His office needed him. He shook my hand. Walter, if they escalate further, call me. But I think you've got it from here. After he left, I sat in my car. My phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Harrison, this is Scott Elliott. I'm calling to propose a settlement. My clients will vacate within 30 days if you'll waive claims for back rent. No. Mr. Harrison, litigation over rent isn't about rent. It's about accountability. They pay what they owe, or I file eviction with full documentation of their fraud attempt. Their choice. Silence. Then Elliott's voice, harder. My clients have rights, and I have documentation. How do you think that plays in eviction court, counselor? I drove home. The house was empty. I spent the afternoon with Roberta Fields, drafting a demand letter. Professional, detailed, unemotional. Total, $47,300. Two options. Pay in full within 30 days, or vacate within 45 days. This is aggressive, Roberta noted. They were aggressive when they tried to forge documents. Brandon and Ashley came home late. I heard them fighting, blame being assigned. Around midnight, text from Brandon. We need to talk. Then, Dad, please, we can work this out. Then, you're really going to destroy your own son over money? I turned off my phone. Next morning, they waited in the kitchen. We got your letter, Ashley said, voice tight. $47,000, that's ridiculous. That's accurate. Every item documented. We can't pay that, Brandon said, then vacate within 45 days. We're not leaving, Ashley declared. You'll have to evict us. The kind who doesn't accept theft from his own family? I can live with that reputation. I called Robert Shaw. Not Gerald, not Roberta. Robert Shaw. Walter, how can I help? At the hearing, you mentioned you let Brandon go because of the fraud. Was that the only reason? Pause. You want the truth? Brandon's been a problem for 6 months. Missed deadlines, blamed others, took credit for work he didn't do. I was already planning to let him go. The fraud just gave me cause without wrongful termination claims. 3 days later, Ashley and Brandon presented their counteroffer. Leave in 60 days. Waive all expenses. They won't contest or badmouth me. Counteroffer, I told Roberta. 45 days. They pay $15,000, a third of actual debt. If they don't accept, I file eviction and pursue the full amount. The response came within hours. They'd accept. 45 days. $15,000. Then they'd be gone. That night, I sat in my observatory, watching Jupiter transit across the sky. Brandon and Ashley would leave. The house would be quiet. I'd won. But I'd also lost something. Some hope that family meant what I'd always thought it meant. The stars didn't care about my family drama. Maybe that was the lesson. Actions have consequences. Physics doesn't negotiate, and neither did I. The 45 days passed slowly. Brandon and Ashley packed in stages, each box representing retreat from territory they'd thought was theirs. The $15,000 arrived in 2 payments, $10,000 immediately, $5,000 2 weeks later, scraped together from somewhere. A week before departure, Robert Shaw called about a warehouse appraisal. At the end, he said, after the hearing, I reviewed Brandon's work history, found concerning patterns, expense reports that didn't add up, inflated charges. Nothing I could prove as fraud, but enough to make me glad we parted ways. He paused. If he applies elsewhere in tech and they call for a reference, I'll be honest about why his employment ended. Brandon's fraud hadn't just cost him this job. It would follow him. The tech community in Austin was tight. Word traveled. One more thing, Robert continued. I reported it to our compliance office. They flagged it with the industry association. Any company doing thorough background checks will find it. 2 days later, Ashley confronted me in the kitchen. Brandon lost another interview today, 3rd one this month. They keep finding something concerning in his background. I told Robert the truth when he asked. What he did with that information was his decision. You destroyed his career? Her hands shook with rage. Your own son. Ashley, you didn't try to help me. You tried to steal from me. There's a difference. We're family. You used a fake notary to forge documents. You filed false claims about my competence. You lived here 3 years without paying a bill. That's not family. That's criminal behavior. She grabbed her purse, stormed toward the door, stopped. Brandon still loves you. He thinks there's some way back. But I know better. You're just a vindictive old man who values property more than people. I value honesty. I value integrity. I value people who earn instead of steal. If that makes me vindictive, I'll wear that label. Their last morning arrived. I watched from the observatory as they loaded a rented truck, Ashley directing, Brandon carrying. They drove away around noon without saying goodbye. I walked through the house room by room. Empty guest bedroom, cleared study, available garage space. The house felt bigger, quieter, mine. I spent the afternoon restoring things, moved astronomy equipment back, rehung photos, put books on shelves, small acts of reclamation. Gerald called. Heard they moved out. Yes, the house is quiet. You won. They're gone. Assets protected. Justice served. Yes. You don't sound like someone who just won. I won, but I lost something too. Some illusion about family. Blood doesn't mean much if it's being used to bleed you dry. You taught your son a lesson. Whether he learns it is up to him now. I sat in the observatory until late, watched stars emerge, the same sky that would be there long after this drama faded. Consistent, predictable, honest in a way people rarely are. For now, that was enough. December came with cold nights and clear winter skies. The house stayed quiet, no footsteps overhead, no arguments, no defending my territory, just silence and space and freedom. Gerald visited one evening with whiskey. We sat in my reclaimed living room, my mother's portrait back where it belonged. You ever regret it? He asked. I regret that it was necessary. But if I hadn't, they would have taken everything. So no. Your son learned an expensive lesson. Maybe. Time will tell if he learned it or just learned to resent me. 3 weeks later, an envelope arrived. Brandon's handwriting. Inside, a single note. Dad, I still don't understand why you did this. We were trying to help, and you treated us like criminals. But working 2 jobs now to afford a 1-bedroom apartment, I'm starting to understand something about effort, about earning instead of expecting. I'm not saying you were right, but maybe I wasn't entirely right either. Maybe someday we can talk. Brandon. No love, no sorry, just facts and the smallest crack in his certainty. I folded it, put it in my desk, didn't respond. Some lessons take time to absorb. That night in my observatory, I found Orion clear and bright. Same stars Brandon and I had looked at when he was young, amazed by Jupiter's moons. That boy was still in there somewhere. Whether he'd find him again wasn't up to me. I'd done my part, taught the lesson, set the boundary, held the line. The rest was his journey. I found the Orion Nebula through my telescope, that cloud where new stars were being born, creation and destruction happening simultaneously. The universe didn't care about my family drama, but right now I had my house back, my peace, my justice. 28 years as a prosecutor taught me to read people, build cases, win. But this fight taught me something else. Sometimes the people closest to you are the ones you must defend against most carefully. Brandon thought I'd become cold, vindictive, unforgiving. Maybe I had, or maybe I'd just stopped being convenient. I looked at stars that died millennia ago, their light just reaching my eyes, consequences arriving on a delay. Brandon would understand eventually, or he wouldn't. Either way, I'd sleep well tonight in my house, surrounded by my things, free from manipulation disguised as family love. I'd taught him the most valuable lesson. Actions have consequences, and blood relation doesn't exempt you from accountability. Whether he appreciated or resented that lesson was up to him. I'd done my job, and I'd won. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.